My name is Javier Solorzano. I am a writer, artist, comic book creator from Los Angeles, California. And I write and draw a lot of comics that deal with like lucha libre and cats. I started Lucha Cat as a sort of clothing brand to do those two sort of parts of my life that I sort of tend to always fall back on and mash them up together. And that clothing line kind of morphed into a new comic book series that has consumed me for the better part of the last year called Super Lucha Cats, which is going to be a sort of a comic book series where think of it as like Scooby Doo and the gang meets El Santo and Blue Demon. And it's going to take place uh, areas around my hometown. I grew up in Bell Gardens, California. That's where they're from. And they'll be meeting and fighting with monsters in places like Downey, East LA, Maywood, and what else? Oh, I also have a comic book called Luchissima, which is more of a straightforward lucha libre comic book, which is going to be, it's a little less sci-fi and a little bit more just pulpy 80s people in masks hopping out of cars and fighting fighting bad guys for the most part. So growing up, I kind of always gravitated towards drawing, painting, and even at a young age, I knew that what I wanted to do when I grew up was telling stories somehow. For a long time, that was I want to write books, and then that became, well, I want to do movies, I want to do cartoons. And when I got out of college, I realized all of those things sort of require you to work with groups of other people. And I can be a bit of a loner a lot of times. And I fell back to a lot of the stuff I did when I was a kid, which was draw comic books. When I was like 5, 6, my dad works, he still works at a commissary for a restaurant chain. And he'd bring home these giant sheets of like pink and orange butcher paper, and he'd bring me the Sharpies that the carniceros would, write on the paper like carne molida, whatever. And he told me like, here, draw with this, do whatever you want with this. And a lot of those early drawings were stories about me and my dog at the time. So I kind of always dealt with narratives around my pets and around those characters then merging with the stuff I was watching on TV, which was, Spider-Man, Batman, and then Lucha Libre, which was a huge turning point for me because luchadores to me they're real life superheroes, right? They wear the mask, they have an entire secret identity. They literally fight bad guys in front of us, and a lot of times for us because those bad guys are disrespecting us, they're talking bad about our hometown. And to see that live and be able to like have them wave at you as a child, it just blew my mind wide open. And so growing up, I was always drawing, luchadores in space, luchadores riding dinosaurs, just taking the stuff I would see like Santo and Mil Máscaras and those guys in those movies I would watch, and just blowing it out with like stuff I was watching on TV, like Transformers and Godzilla. And as I got older, hi Coco, that was my cat. A lot of those influences also started getting seasoned with other stuff I saw growing up. So if it was lowrider magazines with my cousin, if it was athletes I looked up to like Magic Johnson, and taking the ideas of like the team color jerseys and making superhero costumes out of those things, that sort of amalgamation of everything I was consuming kind of always kept pushing me forward. And now that I'm older, I felt the need to sort of I want to put out a comic, and so I did. I started falling back on the things that were there when I was a kid, which was my pets, lucha libre, and my cultura. Um, One of my mentors told me very early on a lot of narrative ideas have been done already, but nobody has told your story. You have a story inside of you. That's what makes it unique. And so for me, that is things like Lucha Libre. It's my cats, Coco and Pizza. It's eating tacos with your friends in the middle of the night. And a lot of my comic books sort of deal with those things. She's very vocal. She wants to be in this interview. um, and that's always just been my like guiding light with a lot of the stuff I do. Um, Early on when I started doing cons, I did a lot of fan art, and that was more stuff just in the back of my mind. I am drawing Pokemon in order to pay for comic book printing in like a year. And once I was able to do that, I'm being able to focus on those stories that I want to tell has been incredibly rewarding, because now I get to meet young people who remind me of me when I was that age, and the looks on their faces when you tell them like, this is something you can do, is incredible. And I can't describe that. That's one of like the most beautiful parts about this whole thing, is kids realizing that their stories matter, because they're seeing people that look like them, sound like them, talk to them in the language their parents speak to them in. And that's kind of important. And that went like really off tangent, but we'll roll with it. Very early on, most of my art was very physical media. It was paintings, it was drawings on postcards, stuff for art shows. And like I said, in the beginning, a lot of it was fan art, because that was how I sort of got my feet wet with like putting stuff out in front of people you don't know. And that sort of very like physical way of creating art, where you're getting paint on yourself, you're altering the space where you create the art. So like my desk was getting paint splotches on it, transitioned into a very digital way of creating art now, where I would say 90% of what I draw is on my computer, and it's on my drawing tablet. And I've felt both ways about it. Like there's times where I lament that I haven't really painted anything in a while, but there's other times where I'm able to test stuff out over and over and really try things without ruining the canvas, so to speak. And that sort of coincided with actually making the jump into making like a comic book and not just an art piece, you know what I mean? So being able to draw a comic book, at least for me digitally, provided me an opportunity to try stuff out panel per panel without spending an entire day to find out, oh, that didn't work for me, because I can just hit Control-Z. But even as I was drawing in Photoshop, I would find myself realizing a lot of the stuff I learned when I was cutting my teeth doing physical drawing was now really helping me when I was drawing digitally. And drawing like Lucha Libre comics especially I always knew that was gonna be the comic book and that's gonna be what it dealt with. But over time, I realized Lucha Libre is like one of my loves, but the other one is my cats. It's my pets that are part of like my life. Stories about them only I can tell. And so the like I said, that became doing t-shirts, because at the time it was, I'll draw it once and then let it go. And then people started asking, well, where's the story behind this? What's the character about? And that's when you sort of realize that putting art out in front of people can help you learn a lot about the art you're making. I'm kind of a believer that once you put something out, it's almost no longer yours, because you're giving it to your community, you're giving it to the kids where you live, you're giving it to the people in the areas where you're presenting it, right? It's your offering to the space. And for me in that instance, that was like, that turned around and basically told me, your fun drawings have the potential to be a story. Your little one-off projects can be a narrative that people care about. And I felt like a kid again. I felt like when I was in Miss Escudet's class in room 1 in Suva Elementary, drawing comics about my pet dog when I was a kid. And so I started drawing Super Lucha Cats, and that snowballed into this entire thing where it's just everything I love is now just getting mashed together into this. I don't know if it's a sphere or if it's a brick yet. Ask me again in a year, it might change. But right now I'm having a lot of fun with it. But that thing would never have happened without the willingness to like adapt with how I do my art. If I was still drawing like paintings and postcards, there wouldn't be a story about cats fighting monsters in Bell Gardens. And part of that is also the fact that, I was encouraged to do that by people in my community, people in the spaces where I live and where I occupy space, telling me, I want to know more about this. I want to read about a cat that fights crime where my little child lives. And you don't know that stuff when you're in the thick of it. When you're drawing, you're very preoccupied with, does it look good? Are people going to like it? Am I going to be happy with it? And what you don't realize a lot of times, putting it out and letting people do what they will with it provides you an opportunity for growth. And I'm really excited about that part of this when I put out the new comic, because I want to see the face on the kid who lives in Bell Gardens when they open up the first page and it says City of Bell Gardens right there. Because I would get excited as a kid if something took place in Los Angeles, and that's like 20 miles from where I grew up, right? So I'm excited about how much more this blob is going to change in like the next year. So, I mean, in light of the pandemic and sort of losing that physical space to meet and talk with people and having to do it all digitally on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, for me, it's been a challenge. It's very hard for me to like keep that energy of producing content every day and reaching out every day on social media, but I have faith that whatever, I don't expect us to go back to normal, but whatever the new normal is, when we find a way to sort of live with this virus, when that happens, I look forward to that just initial reunion with everybody, because I do miss going to a show. And I was telling my girlfriend Annie about this, was I have artist friends who live within like 10 miles of me, but some of them, the last time I saw them was in Ohio, in San Francisco, in Texas. You know what I mean? Like your neighbors that you have that you don't really get to see all that often. And for a lot of us, that means it's because we're working day jobs, we're working on our projects, we're taking time to focus on our mental health, we're dealing with family. You realize now, oh, I've been taking a lot of that face-to-face interaction for granted. But in terms of doing it all digitally, it's been very, personally for me, kind of exhausting, because I need to like work my way up to like be super like talkative and social. But it's been very also reassuring seeing the people that are able to produce content every day, and especially in like the last like 3 months, creating content for Black Lives Matter, for LGBTQ outreach, for defunding ICE, stuff like that. Like it's been incredibly encouraging, because Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, they give you that sort of chance to reach out beyond just your social circles in real life, right? A hashtag can go a long way. And that part of it, sort of seeing, it's been really great seeing artists I follow who before were not very politically active in their work become a little bit radicalized by what they're seeing happening and creating content that speaks to those issues now. And then on top of that, seeing younger people consume that and engage with it. And I'm not sure we would have had that if we had a pandemic. And people much smarter than me can probably talk to you about whether or not that's a good or a bad thing. But in light of our circumstance, it's been one of like the highlights is seeing my friends go and log into Zoom meetings with like city council to find out what the budget being proposed is gonna like give money towards, right? Are we gonna choose to fund local outreach for kids and address homelessness and deal with drug addiction in our community? Or are we just gonna keep flowing money to the same places as it always has been and not really addressing the issues? And I mean, even me, I wasn't always the most active in that sense with my art because I never really felt I had a good, like I always felt there's people who can say this much better than I can. But now I'm realizing, no, you just need to say it. You need to say it even if you're parroting what somebody you really resonate with and admire said. Amplify that. If that's what you can do, amplify that. If you have a following of 100 people on Instagram, turn around and provide that 100-person, space to like a Black voice, to a queer voice, to a minority voice, and let that filter out to people who might not have heard it. And that part has been the most, I'm not going to say rewarding because I don't want to breed complacency in it because we can't stop doing it, but it's been really nice seeing that because it's been rough the last 3.5 years for a lot of people. There's people living in your communities who are unsure if they want to go outside before the pandemic because they don't want to get deported, even though they're providing essential services in your neighborhood. And now those people at least know that somebody in their neighborhood cares about them and is speaking out for them. And we might not have had that before. Do I wish we could go out and hug each other and give my friends a kiss on the cheek and hold them tight? Of course I do. But I think we need to come to grips with the fact that we're going to have to respect social distance for a while. We're going to have to wear our masks and now focus on what we're doing online because people are at home now. They're on their phones longer. What are they consuming? Are we going to let them read about minority issues, or are we going to turn around and let them read stuff like Pizzagate and QAnon? Like, it's a very real thing now. But that wave of like, we're gonna push back on this, and we're gonna wear our masks at a protest has been very encouraging. I think, let me restart that. The potential for art and storytelling, especially right now, I think is paramount. And it's super important because art has always been our way of escaping our current reality, right? And right now our current reality objectively sucks. Like, pardon my language, but it's really rough for a lot of people right now. People are losing their homes, people are losing their jobs, they're losing access to medicine, but having 10, 20 minutes to watch a TV show, read a book, look at art is powerful. And I think especially for kids, it's important that we don't lose sight of that, because our kids are watching. They're looking up and they're seeing how we're reacting to everything that's going on. And I mean, for me, comic books, TV cartoons, lucha libre matches, they were always a positive escape, because they allowed me to be happy, and they allowed me to identify with a hero, identify with a struggle, right? I mean, I never had to fight the Lizard or the Green Goblin, but I could identify with Peter Parker's sense of loneliness at times. I understood what it meant to be an awkward kid in school and feeling like you're in this like shadow bubble when secretly you're dealing with all kinds of stuff behind you. And there's kids right now that are dealing with that just as it is, and now we're just pancaking it with a pandemic, a recession. They're seeing their parents deal with those things. And I think that's where it's important for creators to sort of step in. You know, and even in activism, in hard times, there's a job for everybody, right? And for creators, it's no different. We have to provide that window of happiness for, I mean, not just children, there's adult people who also need this. And if your comic book about, I mean, for me, it's lucha libre and cats. If there's a little kid out there with a pet cat that they have pretend adventures with, if he reads the book and it makes him happy, you know, then like my job is done. I've done something to help that person's day. And if we stop doing that, those windows start shutting, they start closing. And for minorities especially, we don't have a lot of those windows as it is. You know, we, as a kid in the 90s, for me, like my favorite Spider-Man was the Scarlet Spider and Spider-Man 2099. And it was only because Scarlet Spider had a hoodie like mine, and Spider-Man 2099 was Mexican. Like, I identified with those guys a little bit more than Peter Parker. If they hadn't been there, I'm not saying it would have been bad, but I wouldn't have had that like, oh, it's me. It's somebody like me, right? For a lot of minorities, those windows, there's not a lot of them. It's our responsibility to keep opening those windows and being like, stories about you, people who look like you, who aren't just drug dealers and gangbangers, right? Somebody like you who's dealing with like the neurosis of trying to make a new friend. Those kinds of stories are important because they're rewarding for people who consume them and identify with them. And I would say, especially for artists, it's really hard to like feel like what you're doing matters. Because I definitely felt that like a month into this, I felt there's people marching in the street and I can't go out there. I can't be there. How am I helping? And then you have to sit back and remember, like, somebody is gonna get something out of the work you create if you're doing it with good intentions. If you're creating a story from the heart with, you know, positive reinforcement and some happiness in it, it's gonna make somebody's day somewhere. And it can't if you don't do it. So you have to do it. And I know it's hard. I know it's difficult to like motivate yourself to draw stuff when it feels like everything around you is burning. But your stories provide some of the water that puts that fire out. And that's why your stories matter. And that's why you should tell your stories, right? I mean, we as artists have to fight off just the always present like feeling of like, nobody will like this, it's not good enough. And now we have to also fight the need of like the need to think that, oh, what I do doesn't matter right now. Well, no, it does. And it's hard and it's heavy and it's exhausting, but we got to do it. And just remember to take care of yourself mentally as well. Don't burn yourself out. You got to take care of your mental health when you do it, but you got to do it. Uh, we may not be able to see those readers and those kids in person, but I mean, I've gotten some messages on social media and Instagram telling me like, hey, I read the comic book with my kid again. We had a really good time. Can't wait to see you at the next show. And stuff like that means a lot, but stuff like that doesn't happen if you don't put out the work for it. And I think that's where the potential for storytelling is, especially in times like right now, because the story that we're watching in real life is rough. And if you can provide an escape from that or a motivation to like fight that, even better, right? But you need to do it. You need to put it out. And yeah.